Iquitos is on the banks of the Amazon. It was once famous for exporting rubber to Europe. These days, it's a mecca for anyone trying to get their hands on a new it drug, a natural high known as ayahuasca. Here, they call it the medicine, and each year, tens of thousands are coming to try it. Many of those are Australians. Some claim it can cure everything from cancer to heroin addiction. But not all ayahuasca experiences end well. I want to investigate the death of one young man. This is where Matt Dawson-Clarke's journey into the Amazon began, and it's where it ended. And that's why we've come here, to try and get some answers about how he died and why.
It was a Sunday afternoon. The phone was ringing, and usually I'll ignore it, but for some reason I thought, I've got to get that call.
Hello? It's Lindy here.
And then I got this really heavy accent that came through saying, is that Matthew's mum? And I can remember thinking, who's this?
I'm sorry, who are you?
And she said to me, I'm so sorry for your loss. At that point, my heart just stopped. And I think I started screaming at her. And I just said, what are you talking about? And she said, I was on a retreat with your son. Matthew died. He died 3 days ago. My world stopped that day. So now I had a son apparently dead. I didn't know where he was. And this is my world. You know, it doesn't happen to people like me. And it doesn't happen to my son.
Like so many young people from this part of the world, Matt was living and working in London. From there, he got work on a super yacht, taking clients through the waters of the Mediterranean, all the way to the Caribbean.
Matt had a lot of promise, and the saddest part of it all, apart from losing our boy, is that the opportunity of seeing what he was going to become, we're not going to have.
Yeah, landing on each other would be shit. Let's not do that.
I'm gonna be over, but I can't. I don't treat my head. Always
On the 6th of September 2015, Matthew Dawson-Clarke's family at home in Auckland desperately starts searching for information. They reach the tour operator in Peru, Andy Metcalf, and record the call.
I want somebody to tell me where Matt is.
He's currently in the morgue in Iquitos.
And where?
In the Iquitos morgue.
To have to say goodbye to one of your kids, all you know is you want as much of them back as you can get. Can I rely on you to help us track things down so we can do the right thing for our son?
This is our son.
Of course.
Please, I beg of you, do you have anyone that can help us there find our son?
It turns out Andy Metcalf had told other members of the retreat he'd broken the news to Matt's family.
He told them that he had told the parents what had happened. So he lied. He never told us at all. He's acknowledged that since.
Iquitos holds a lot of the answers, not just about Matt's death, but also about why so many people are being drawn to ayahuasca. This ancient custom, once confined to the Amazon, has spread like wildfire on the internet. It's now even available in countries like Australia and America.
Now we're going just down, this is the Ataya River, so we're just taking a short ride down here to Mamaikuna, to the land, and then because of it's flooded we'll go in through the Camu Camu orchard.
Freddie Finlay is a British expat who lives here.
Stunning area.
From a successful child actor in London to a drug addict living on the streets of Peru's capital, Lima, he's now an apprentice shaman, a traditional healer. Tonight, Freddie's agreed to host us for an ayahuasca ceremony.
Just be careful getting off here because the floor's really slippy. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is Mamaikuna.
Okay.
Best way to start the day.
Ayahuasca only grows in the Amazon jungle, and when brewed with other plants, it's one of the most powerful hallucinogens on Earth. It's illegal in most Western countries, but not here in Peru. Each retreat has its own recipe.
If you just drank this by itself, you would just purge. You know, you just vomit and go to the bathroom. But the combination of the ayahuasca and the chacruna and the other two things is what makes our medicine. You know, I guess, you know, I've always, I have a history of, you know, drug abuse. And from an early age, you know, from when I was 13, 14 onwards, you know, with crack, heroin, also did a lot of, you know, ecstasy and acid and things like that, but you know, the harder drugs, I had problems with them. You know, from having quite a good career and earning some good money, you know, having a lot of things, I lost everything.
What proportion of the people do you think coming here are trying to deal with an addiction of some form?
A lot of them. Some people have, you know, an addiction to marijuana. Other people that are doing heroin, other people that are doing coke. You know, whatever it is. You know, there's a lot of them coming.
So how effective do you think it is as a mechanism for dealing with addiction?
I think it's very effective. And I would say that I'm living proof of it. You know, because I was a mess. You know, a big mess.
How safe is it to come here and try this?
It's very safe. Again, as long as you're with the right person, you know, the right people. You know how this works, you know, nothing happens like that.
People come here to drink ayahuasca for all sorts of reasons. There are the sick and vulnerable, people with addictions, and with post-traumatic stress.
I feel now like totally symmetric, and before I felt absolutely asymmetric.
But there's also the younger crowd. A lot of them just come for the adventure.
Well, the afternoon light is disappearing pretty quickly, and inside they're preparing for their ayahuasca ceremony. We are allowed to watch, but the whole thing is going to happen in darkness.
What we're going to do now, is prepare the medicine. We're going to icarar el ayahuasca. We're going to sing to the medicine.
This ceremony will continue for the next 5 or 6 hours, as will the singing and the purging.
Salud.
Salud, brother. No, no, male, no, no, male, si molestias y dolores y se sientan bien limpiados.
Para de feo de Luego de llegar, elemental de la vida, por eso llegamos aquí, para conocer la muerte.
Oh, I did it.
I think about Matt every day, even though I let myself think about it very long.
After Matthew Dawson Clark's death, his parents began contacting the other guests from the retreat to find out what happened. They reached Richard from Texas.
There's not one day that has gone by that I haven't thought about him or his family and the pain that they must have been going through and are going through right now.
Talking about his ayahuasca journey could cost Richard his job, so we've agreed to keep his identity and his real name secret. Like many others, he hoped this drug would relieve his PTSD brought on by working as a paramedic with the fire department. Instead, it only made things worse.
I feel more lost now than I was when I started, and the shameful thing is that I was on my way. You know, I was almost there.
Here's what we understand happened to Matt on the 3rd of September 2015. It begins the morning after a wild night of dancing around the fire. In preparation for another ayahuasca ceremony, Matthew drinks a powerful brew of tobacco tea, part of the cleansing ritual. Within 15 minutes, he feels unwell. He says he thinks he's been poisoned. Matt is attended by the shaman who prepared the tea, Don Lucho, and a helper, Carolina. At one point during the day, they cycle Matt's legs as if to maintain circulation.
My intuition as a medic, as someone who's been doing this job for a while, was that something wasn't right with Matt.
Richard, the paramedic, offers help, but is turned away at the door by Carolina. It's not until the very end of the day, at 5 p.m, when Matt goes into cardiac arrest, that Richard is finally enlisted to help.
Does he have a pulse or something? Do you feel a pulse?
I realized that I was the only person there that was medically trained. No one had any first aid training or CPR training at all.
A frantic effort begins. CPR, a vehicle to get Matt to hospital. Deep in the Amazon, it's a dangerous and difficult journey. The vehicle gets bogged, it even tips over. Eventually, making it down the river, just before midnight, Matthew Dawson Clark's body is released to the morgue. Richard is still deeply troubled by the events of that week.
I mean, he's just a 24-year-old kid, for God's sakes, you know. He shouldn't be dead. He went there to go better himself, to become a better person, a better human being. And I'm sorry that, I couldn't, I tried, Sorry.
You okay?
I tried so hard. I did everything in my power to save their son. And, I'm sorry.
The striking thing about Matt's death is that no one has ever been held accountable. In the year and a half since, another 5 people have died in this region in connection with ayahuasca retreats. The investigation into Matt's death was closed last year, and the shaman Don Lucho is still operating Kapatari, the retreat where Matt died, and still offering that same tobacco tea. That's where I'm heading now.
Well, it's fair to say this place is remote. It's taken us 2 boat journeys to get here. Buenos dias, a good 30 to 40 minutes walking deeper into the jungle. There is no phone reception or patchy reception and no electricity. If something goes wrong out here, you're a long way from help.
Finding Don Lucho may help answer some of the many questions about Matt's death.
Oh, there's Kapatari.
Hola.
Ahí hay alguien.
Hi, I'm Hamish. I'm from the ABC Australia.
¿Qué tal? Es ABC Australia.
We're hoping to speak with Don Lucho, if that's possible. We have some questions.
Don
about-
Lucho?
Yeah.
Don Lucho ahorita no está, salió para Iquitos. ¿Tú estás en qué parte?
It turns out the man we've come here to find has gone to town for the day.
Hago un favorcito. Mira, tenemos unos señores que vinieron desde Australia.
So we race back to the port to find Don Lucho is waiting.
We just have a few questions about the death of Matthew Dawson Clark. We're looking into his case. I'd like to understand why you didn't take him to hospital that day.
Que nosotros trabajamos con traductores y el traductor no se ha comunicado conmigo, entonces ha sido un poco de tardanza, pero se ha tratado de poner del centro a la ciudad, pero ese día era huelga.
But he took the tobacco tea very early in the day, and immediately he said that he thought he'd been poisoned, and it wasn't until 5 p.m. when you asked others for help.
Es que tenía un trance, ¿no? En un momento se sentía bien, ya estoy bien, decía, ya estoy bien. Y ya entonces, otra vez nuevamente, se sentía un poco mal. Entonces, así estaba, no estaba como algo continuo, ¿no? Si no tenía un trance, it's okay.
And have you got anything you want to say to Matthew Dawson Clark's parents?
Ya, bueno, de mi parte, creo que ha sido uno, como llamamos, también puede ser la parte del destino de la persona. Se busca, puedes morirte accidentado, con un carro, con una bala. Bueno, yo creo que así de eso, porque yo trabajo más de 30 años con el tabaco, no he tenido ese tipo de casos.
Don Lucho might say there's no issue with tobacco teas, but in the very same year that Matt died, a young Canadian woman died after drinking one too. And while Don Lucho says Matt's death is not his fault, remember the tour operator, Andy Metcalf, from the phone calls? He's never been held accountable either.
I just want to know if we might be able to talk to you for the story.
After initially agreeing to see us one day,
It'd be better to talk to you and get your version of things.
I wanted to talk to you. I'd rather not be on camera though.
Yeah, that's okay.
when it comes to meeting the next day, Andy is giving us the slip. He's about to disappear into the jungle, where he now owns his own retreat, and he's texted saying he's too busy. On a tip-off, we learn that's not quite true. Andy is in fact just down the road, having lunch at the Karma Cafe.
Sorry, I heard you were down here, so I thought I'd come and say hi.
It's our last chance to get some answers about his responsibility to his clients. Guys like Andy make a lot of the money in this largely unregulated industry, often more than the local shaman do.
But, you know, clearly there were people that were very upset. A lot of things were said.
A lot of people are still trusting Andy Metcalf with their lives in these remote jungle retreats. So we decide to secretly record his response.
I don't accept blame for what happened. You know, we had well over 1,000 people on the retreats at Capitari before Matt came along, and no incidents whatsoever, you know, so, you know, maybe we were complacent after that.
But what about things like first aid and training and like plans for if things go wrong?
I guess it wasn't really something that we imagined would ever happen in a way. I mean, it's not very easy to get first aid training in Peru in heats, you know.
But then I guess when you accept the money, you take some responsibility, right?
Sure, I suppose so. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, the shaman is ultimately responsible. The shaman gives the medicine. I'm not Capitari. Yes, I did accept the money. But you know, I kind of in a way work as a kind of a middleman or whatever. So you could argue that there's some responsibility there. If things were handled very badly in the aftermath as well, then I certainly accept some responsibility for that. You know, the big story, which everybody's ignoring, is, you know, how many people die from pharmaceutical drugs every year, even ones that were properly subscribed. You know, things happen. Shit happens. It's always going to happen. You know.
Shit happens? Well, that's not how Matt's family sees this. The reality is that Matt Dawson Clark paid $650 to go to a retreat, Capitari, that we've learned was and still is operating illegally. And when things went wrong for Matt, it was another tourist, Richard from Texas, who had to try and save him.
What sort of stands out to me is that it wasn't the staff that sort of initiated taking Matt to hospital.
I was the one that had to take charge of this whole situation. There was no help. Don Lucho didn't come. He didn't come, with us along the way to the boat, or he wasn't there. I did feel like
Did you take responsibility for Matt?
I've never heard him take responsibility.
Andy saying that he'd told the parents, was he telling the truth?
I would say not.
So, will anyone ever be forced to take responsibility for this death?
Since we've been working on this story, there's been a huge development. Matt Dawson Clark's family lodged a formal complaint with the Peruvian authorities, and that's now led them to reopen the investigation.
As a result, Don Lucio is now inside this building making a pointed claim to the prosecutor that Matthew Dawson Clark may have been using other drugs just before coming to the retreat. Now, Matt did tell others on the retreat that, like many young people, he'd used some drugs in the past. But the claim made by Don Lucio is not supported by any actual evidence.
Posiblemente hay que haber consumido droga y ya entonces con la planta ha habido un cruce, entonces porque la planta yo vengo trabajando más de 20 años atrás y sigo trabajando y no tengo problemas. Pues me tienen que decir ahora, tienen que decirme qué consume, qué medicina está consumiendo y qué tipo de paciente está consumiendo para poder yo entenderles a eso. Porque si no me dicen eso, es lo que ha pasado.
Andy Metcalf says that he takes no blame for what happened, that he was just a middleman.
Ahora dice ahorita pues que era socio, pues te digo, pero él estaba agarrando más dinero, eso yo me he percatado, pero él estaba agarrando más, posicionando más que yo. Yo que hago el trabajo, ve, yo sé quién está responsable. Andy, yo soy el único responsable. Yo soy el único que si me mata, me va a matar a mí. Si es que voy a la cárcel, yo voy a la cárcel. Eso es lo que a mí me molesta. En momentos difíciles, ahí se me voy para el otro lado. No, la cosa hay que luchar de un principio a fin. Eso me gusta a mí.
Don Lucio still hasn't been charged, and convictions for ayahuasca-related deaths are very rare.
So what we've got here is one of the autopsy reports that's come out of Peru.
Matthew Dawson Clark's family has now spent a year and a half fighting for justice and fighting for answers.
They're referring to the comment about stimulant drugs such as cocaine or methamphetamine. No information regarding this in the case. Neither of these drugs were detected by the post-mortem and tox analysis.
The post-mortem from Peru blames pneumonia, leading to cardiac arrest for Matt's death. But in New Zealand, so far a coronial inquest remains inconclusive, and an autopsy report points to possible nicotine poisoning.
Possible nicotine toxicity which fits exactly with what we believe to be the occasion that led to him being given the tobacco tea.
On the accusation about Matt using drugs before he went to Kapatari, his family and the available evidence are clear.
Well, Matthew wasn't a drinker. He certainly wasn't a methamphetamine addict. Our belief is pretty simple, is the rumours that were proliferating out of Peru really just were to give themselves, they thought, some breathing space, I believe, because at the end of the day, they're too easily disproved.
But you do, though, that's the thing.
There's a part of you that's going to be forever empty. It can't be undone. And you go through regular periods where you just actually, you just want to go and be with them. And that's often at the expense of those that are still with us while you're alive. Because it's very easy just to go, I don't want to be here anymore.
It took a very long time.
Lindy Dawson-Clark even had to fight just to get Matt's belongings back home from Peru.
Yes.
This is my place of remembrance.
What is it about the physical things, do you think?
It reminds me, I mean, every day when I go walking in the morning as I'm coming down the driveway, I yell out to the universe, I have a son. His name's Matthew James Dawson-Clark. Because people forget and their lives move on. But for me, my life stopped that day. And I have to remember that I have a son. These physical things remind me that he was my boy and he lived here and he still does live here.
She wants anyone thinking about ayahuasca to know the risks.
I think for me personally, it wasn't the aya that took my son. It was the tobacco purge that took my son. They need to be aware that it may not be right for everybody. And if you are a really healthy individual, what are you putting into your system? And the possibility of you dying can happen. I'm not here to tell people what to do with their lives. I'm just here to say, be aware.
How would you describe what it is you've been through?
It's now been 16 months of darkness and of torment and of me searching for my son, because my belief was that he was in such agony when he died and I wasn't there to save him.